to go to our final conversation of the day, a little show of hands or in the online chat to check who has had oat milk before. Who's tried oat milk before? Excellent. Okay, good. So we know what we're talking about. And who is familiar with Oatly, the brand? Okay, excellent, Shaunagh. That gives you a bit of a starting point. So it's a real honor to welcome Shaunagh to join us today, who is at Oatly. I'm going to come onto her role in a second, but I'm going to ask her to tell us a little bit about Oatly. We all know what it is, who they are. It's a household name, but just in terms of some of the stats, kind of the reach of the business, it'd be great to know.
Thank you. Oh, right. Yep. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Yeah, well, what a show of hands. So I don't need to do the sort of intro spiel and explain what the hell oat milk is, which is great, though I'm happy to do it. So I think what's quite interesting about our origin story is not many people know we were actually founded in the early 90s. Oatly's actually older than I am. And it was born out of a university in Sweden called Lund University. Professor Rikard Öst, I don't pronounce his name right, even though I try, was actually trying to find a milk alternative for individuals who had allergies to milk proteins, lactose intolerance, those sorts of things. And in doing so, he actually invented oat milk. Pretty cool accolade, I would say. And patented a process, this enzyme process, which I don't pretend to understand. And in doing so, realize that, we can actually mimic milk in many ways, have this creamy, delicious, quite neutral taste, and also with a crop that happens to be far better for the planet, and we'll get into that. So that's what we do. We take it from there. We had a big rebrand in early 2000s. And I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I think in the plant-based milk category, soy was king early in the 90s. We all wanted a soy latte. And now we see oat as the #1 crop in plant-based, far overtaking other things like almond, soy, coconut, and those other crops. And today we have about 6 to 8%, depending on which stats you look at, of the UK consuming plant-based milks of the total milk category, including dairy milk. And that's chunky. That's a lot bigger than it was, but it's obviously, we still have a really long way to go. And within that, coming to Oatly specifically, we are now operating in 30 countries around the world, so very much a global organization, and we're the #1 selling brand worldwide. So we're sort of really spearheading this growth and trying to drive that plant-based movement.
Fantastic. And what's your role in the organization?
Yes, so my official title is Head of Sustainability Europe and International Markets, which is quite long-winded and also quite nebulous. As we know, sustainability doesn't really know any borders. So in reality, I'm pitching in with projects and strategy and initiatives for, lots of different geographies and global. But what we really mean, we know the word sustainability means different things to different people. But at Oatly, for us, we are looking at sustainability across our full supply chain. So basically, my job is to take our set of global sustainability goals and bring them to life in the markets that we operate in on the ground. Everything from where we source our ingredients to how we manufacture our products and distribute them, to looking after our people, and right down to our interface with the world at large, like talking to governments about how we can update regulations around these things. So the full breadth and width of the E, the S, the G across the supply chain.
So you've touched on this, but how would you say your role kind of fits into other functions like corporate strategy, PR, marketing, those other things?
So I think what's interesting about Oatly is because of our mission, which is to create delicious products that don't feel like a sacrifice, that can let people live healthier lives without recklessly taxing the planet. Because that sustainability is baked into the mission, it then makes the job of the sustainability team quite easy because that is baked into each department as well. So we are very much collaborating across and embedding it throughout the organization, and each team has an accountability towards the overarching mission, not a sort of separate siloed sustainability team over here where people think, great, sustainability team's on it, we don't need to worry about it, we can crack on with our regular KPIs or our business as usual. It's very much throughout the organization, what our public affairs team are working on there's always a sustainability message. I mean, you'll notice perhaps if you're familiar with our advertising, we rarely talk about our products. In our advertising, we're focusing on the sustainability message and what we're bringing, and perhaps we'll come to that next.
Brilliant. Has anyone been to the Oatly website before? I admit that I hadn't before preparing for this talk, and I found it quite interesting. So I'd like to read something from your website. It's a good paragraph, but I think a good long paragraph, but I think it's worth reading in full so that we all kind of hear how you communicate, and as a communications group here, how you're communicating your message. So this is a direct quote from the Oatly website. If you haven't noticed yet, we are a company that has some pretty strong opinions, whether about how we can shift consumption of animals to plants in order to help the longevity of our planet, or about whether the Seattle Mariners will ever play in a World Series. Most companies think that having a strong opinion means scaring away customers who think differently. We think it's a good way to make new friends. So, for the record, we believe we should grow stuff to eat instead of growing stuff to feed animals that then we eat. Everybody, regardless of spiritual beliefs, birth country, race, gender, sexual orientation, or color of their nail polish, is of equal worth. The reckless pursuit of profits without any consideration for the well-being of the planet and the humans that live here should be considered a crime. Companies have as much responsibility as politicians do for building a society that every one of us living in this world can admire. Sorry if I jumbled up a couple of words. So, I mean, that's kind of front and center on the Oatly website. That is pretty clear communications for a brand and a milk company. So tell us a little bit about that paragraph and how it translates into business.
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to, and also people inside Oatly talk like this as well. It's not just the way we talk externally. So I think that's important to note. But, you know, it really comes down to our mission. I mean, just to put this into context, and I haven't been here all day, so I'm not sure what topics have been discussed, but you know, it's absolutely clear, the science is clear that our food system is totally broken. There is no denying that. And it's really, really simple. If we're going to avert the worst effects of the climate crisis, we need to do two things. One is keeping fossil fuels in the ground, and one is reducing the meat and the dairy that we produce and consume. The science is irrevocable on that. The problem is people don't know this. And so it's our business and our job and our duty of care to really make sure that that message gets out there. And we don't shy away from that. And, you know, change is uncomfortable. Rome wasn't built in a day. And we're proud to have we've deliberately built a very strong voice and brand so that we can provoke and start those tricky conversations, because you can't make change without doing that the way we see it.
So would you say that Oatly is a campaigning organization or are you a lobbying organization?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a sort of definition of a lobbying organization or a campaigning organization. I mean, we certainly campaign and we certainly lobby. And, you know, we're not just making oat milk. We're very deliberate in that we want to push the boundaries of what it means to be a business and use our voice to advocate for the change that we need to overhaul the food system. So I think there are some good examples, and I love it when people come up here and pretend they haven't been given the questions in advance. So I am going to refer to my key messages, and you comms people will appreciate that, because I want to give you this really important example. And the reason I need to refer to this is because we have actually quite a few examples of things like this. So we, through our campaigning and lobbying, are trying to achieve many, many things. We have an entire public affairs team. We have an entire, what we call the Oatly Department of Mind Control, which is our creative function, the ODMC. And when we rebranded in early 2013, our CEO at the time hired our now Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Department of Mind Control Officer, John Schoolcraft. He said, I'll take the job on one condition, that we fire the whole marketing department. And the reason for that is not to water down ideas. And so what we do in-house is the briefing, the concept, the creation, and the execution of all creative. They're in-house. And that's really unusual for many businesses. But what it means is that, you know, it's rarely the case that we shy away from an idea, usually the discussion is, oh, how far can we take this? You know, how big can we go? And so the example I want to give is, you know, we're founded in Swedish by origin, and a few years ago launched a campaign which you may or may not have seen because we've rolled it out in other places. It's like milk but made for humans. Now, funnily enough, the dairy industry didn't like that line, so they sued us for it. Company Arla, one of the largest dairy companies in Europe. And the point, you know, a lot of people there go, oh, you know, you're just sort of being deliberately antagonistic, but well, yes, we are, because we're actually raising a really important point that isn't it weird that we just find this normal? We find it culturally acceptable that we just consume the growth fluid of another species. That is a bit weird. So maybe we should bring that to the fore. And actually, if we get sued for it, we flip the narrative and say, doesn't that just signify how powerful this dairy lobby is? And they won that lawsuit, even though factually, there's nothing wrong with that statement. And I think it's quite an interesting example.
I think what's interesting is the range of facial expressions that is provoked here in the room, from smiles to frowns to raised eyebrows.
Yeah, that's what we want.
I mean, is there a chance that you often miss opportunities, or you kind of go too far, you know, taking such a bold approach?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're coming from. You know, everyone's going to have their different views, and you know, like I say, we don't shy away from being provocative. It's a very deliberate part of our approach, and we actually celebrate the challenges that come with that, and what may be perceived as backlashes, like getting sued by the dairy industry and losing that case. Because of all of it starts really important conversations, like I'm saying. But you know, we were speaking of the Oatly website earlier. We have actually built a website called fuckoatly.com. Don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I already did. And the whole point of that website is it's many things. One, it's an exercise in radical transparency. We spend a lot of time calling for transparency in the food system. You know, as we're talking about, a lot of people have no clue where their food comes from. They're not connected to it. They don't understand the climate impact of it. And we need to change that if we have any hope of reaching our climate targets. So if we're going to call for radical transparency in the food system, we need to practice what we preach and do that ourselves. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, as we're saying, you know, if you're trying to disrupt an industry that's got centuries of a head start and has deeply, you know, cultural, societal, like strongholds, then it is going to be uncomfortable, and people, you know, you are going to ruffle some feathers on the way. So we built this website as a tribute to the discomfort that comes with change, fuckoatly.com, and it's essentially a timeline of all things that we have done wrong as a business, or that have been perceived to have done wrong. Now, many people will see these as failures. We see them as actual, you know, if you're going to relentlessly focus on a mission as we are, then actually it's a sign that it's working if you're making people angry along the way. And that website really goes into the detail around why we have made some of the decisions that we've made, and why it's getting us to our ultimate vision that we're trying to create.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions, but we are going to have some time for comments and questions in the room and our online audience also. So I really want to dig in on this question of behavior change, because it's something that we talk about annually at Communicate, and really thinking about the people who are just like, oat latte, yummy. You know, how important is it that those people understand the kind of sustainability mission and, you know, the issue behind this?
It's a great question. It's one I reflect on a lot. And I think the thing is, you know, we have to, if this is going to work, then there can be zero compromise on taste, performance, quality of the product itself, right? People just won't buy it. It's that simple. So that has to be number one. There's no two ways about that. But at the same time, I wouldn't underestimate that people do actually care and want to understand the sustainability impact of their food. Now, we collect insights on this a lot, and I think we'll come to talk about one of the campaigns that we've just launched. But you know, we've done a recent insights. Over half of British people want to understand where their food comes from, the climate impact it has, and if they had access to that information, then they would swap out these higher footprint food products or drink products. So I don't really care why you do it. It's not, you know, if it's for health reasons, if it's for taste reasons, if it's for sustainability reasons, it doesn't really matter. But we need to cater to all of those, because there are individuals who are going to have different preferences in all those different things.
Absolutely, and food is something that has come up quite a bit today, so it'd be great to hear as we get to it, people who are working in that space. So I'm going to go back to the Oatly website, which I clearly had a very good read of, for another section I thought was pretty interesting. So this is on the Oatly corporate website. We would like to be crystal clear about one thing. We're not a perfect company, not even close. However, our intentions are true, which is why we ask you judge us not on our actions, the things we do to contribute to humanity and the planet, and not solely on all the pretty words crafted to make this website sound cool. I mean, you touched a little bit on that kind of radical transparency, but I mean, I'm interested to know how much the kind of accusation or term around greenwashing comes up for Oatly.
You know, it comes up a lot, and not just within Oatly, right? I think my personal view is there's a arguably larger spotlight put on companies that put themselves out there when it comes to greenwashing. You know, we rarely see as much attention on brands who aren't really claiming to do something really bold, like change the food system or change the transport system, or, you know, these disruptive innovators. But because they're not making these bold claims, they're not in the spotlight so much. So I do think we need to be really careful about, you know, where we're placing the attention. At the same time, we obviously need to make sure claims are accurate, informed, and are clear to consumers. That's a non-negotiable. What I am nervous about, though, is this concept of green hushing, because whilst on the one hand, it's really brilliant that we have, you know, new regulations and green claims codes and all sorts of things coming in to make sure that claims are totally clear and not misleading, and we need that. We also cannot afford to go the other way, where brands are so terrified of being called out for making, you know, what are often claims that they're not deliberately or intentionally misleading. They're with all good intentions. It's just a sort of, you miss a word here or a percentage point there. Honestly, that can be as specific as that. And if people are so scared of getting all these large fines or whatever, they're not going to talk about sustainability at all. Now, for me, that's way more dangerous and way more terrifying if we end up in that camp. So, you know, it is a difficult balancing act to get that right. You do not want to be misleading consumers, but you also want to stay true to your messages and what you're trying to get across. And it's really tough, especially when the regulatory landscape, the laws are changing all the time. Plus, if you're like us and you're operating in, you know, different countries around the world with different rules about this, different languages, different consumers who are going to, you know, resonate with different messages, it's a nearly impossible task. And what we don't want to do is spend so much time worrying about that we're not focusing on the really nitty-gritty stuff of actually, you know, focusing on the things in your supply chain and doing the initiatives that are actually going to have the big impact.
So before we hand over to our audience or our online audience to see if there's any questions, I mean, we've got a room of comms and engagement professionals here who design and run campaigns. So I'm really keen for you to tell us a bit about the carbon labeling campaign, maybe, you know, a bit of the backstory, where it came from, some of the mechanics and what you're hoping to achieve.
Totally. And what I might do quickly as well, because we did a tiny bit of hand showing at the start. Has anyone seen the carbon footprint label on our packs? It's not a test. Nice. 2 people in the room. Oh, 3, 4. Nice. Okay. When you looked at it, did you understand what it meant? Vaguely nod. Nice. Okay, great. So we have been putting those carbon labels on our pack since about 2018, and we're one of the first brands to do it. And I'm conscious of time, so I won't go into all the sort of backstory of why we did that. But I mean, it's a lot of what I've spoken about already, which is we firmly believe that consumers have the right to understand what the environmental impact of the food they're consuming is. Just like when you go to store, you can see the nutritional content, I can see how much it costs. I should be able to see what the environmental impact is, but of course, we can't. So we put the labels on our pack. We do a number format, so it might be like 0.51 kilograms of carbon in the UK, depending on where you're buying the stuff. And that's great, but the number is totally meaningless if you've got nothing to compare it to. I'm a sustainability professional. I've been vegan for 12 years. And when I first looked at that, I thought, I have no idea if that is high or low or good or bad. I don't know. So we, alongside it back in the day, did a campaign, Show Us Your Numbers, where we said, hey, look, the rest of the food industry, you need to do this as well, because it's totally pointless us doing it on our own. We didn't get a lot of bite with that, but we did go to petition in Germany. We went to the German Bundestag and we got over 50,000 petition signatures to get a seat at the table to try to enshrine this in law. We've been waiting for a policy window or something that we could do similar here in the UK, and that has started to be opening up. So we launched a campaign recently. It's both a consumer-facing campaign, but also some public affairs work. The consumer-facing campaign was very large billboards in true Oatly fashion. We have offered very big free media space to big dairy if they reveal their climate numbers too. They didn't take us up on our offer. Surprise, surprise. The offer still stands. So that's the sort of thing when we're sort of calling for this radical transparency that we're talking about. But at the same time, we've published what we're calling a grey paper to the UK government. Obviously, as you know, it would typically be a white paper where you set out a sort of policy recommendation. We've called it a grey paper because just like any very complex solution, the answer always lies somewhere in the grey. This is not a us versus them vegan, non-vegan war. This is about people being given access to information to make their own choices about their food. And you don't have to go vegan, but we do need to reduce. And so we've written this grey paper, circled it around to all the MPs. In fact, I was just at a parliamentary roundtable this morning with the Shadow Minister of Climate Change, and we're really trying to get this message out there. And we're hoping that there is an open policy opportunity to try to get a standard method of climate labeling across the industry, because the problem today is if brands are doing it voluntarily, there's different ways of measuring this stuff. And so as a consumer, you might be comparing apples and pears when you pick up an Oatly and something else, but we need that to be uniform and ideally mandatory. Whether we'll get there, who knows, but maybe if Labour are elected next year, we have a stronger chance.
We've got a couple of online questions, a lot of online questions actually, but I'll just pick a few. So the first one is, for a public sector organisation that is full of passionate people who want to make positive change, but would never be able to or allowed to or brave enough to adopt a wholeheartedly radical, transparent and provocative stance, what can we take away and apply within our limited freedoms?
Wow, it's such a brilliant question. And I also would wish I had someone from the Oatly Department of Mind Control here who is more of an expert on the sort of communication side of things. But what I would say, we are obviously in a unique position where we can make those radical choices and have those creative ideas not get watered down. I mean, we all have to operate within our means, right, and within our constraints. I think we need to start having conversations, even internally. Maybe it doesn't need to be a public-facing thing, but if you just read a couple of articles, there's been a very, very deliberate, concerted effort to downplay the effect of food and that it has on climate. And we need to gently, or not gently, depending on where you are, maybe in the public sector, not so much, but we need to start provoking that and challenging our very deeply entrenched way of thinking. And if you can't do that externally, you can start internally with your peers, your friends, and just start to get people questioning things. Why do we subsidize dairy milk in schools and not plant-based? What if you have a milk allergy? Why, if I'm vegan, I go to hospital tomorrow, I'll have to pay for a plant-based option? That is strange. We need to challenge those, and we can do that. It doesn't need to be a bold, big, very expensive, crazy campaign. We can start closer to home, I think.
We've got time for a couple more. I'm sure there's lots online, but is there anyone in the room who'd like to the hand. We've got two here. Should we take both? Question, comments, and then why don't we take three to finish up? Two in the room and one from online, and we can pull them all together.
Hi, so I'm a market researcher by trade, and I've worked with a food company where I've done a project with vegans. They wanted to produce a plant-based version of a popular food of theirs that is normally made with dairy. And the vegan perspective was very split as to whether, no, you know, we would never eat something from this company that mainly produces sort of dairy-based food, and the other half saying, oh no, but this is such a huge company, if more people get to try the vegan version, then, you know, this can only go the positive way. What is Oatly's position in terms of working with kind of partners, food service, that also produce animal-based foods and drinks?
That's not where I thought that question was going to go, but I like it. Okay, so, well, I think there's two things. You know, what the sort of general position is, if we're going to change the food system, we need more than just vegans to do that, right? Like this, as I said, it's not just about becoming vegan. We need to mainstream this. That is the only way. If we need to reduce our meat and dairy intake by 30% by the year 2035, we're going to need everyone to play their part in that. So we do need to appeal to everyone. And whether that's through how your product tastes or, yeah, the more sort of ethical things coming into question. And so I take from your question is around, you know, if we were to put our products in like a McDonald's or something that also sells burgers like that. Yeah, our view would be we need to be where dairy is. We're not going to shift the needle and move the needle if we're not where dairy is. And that's everywhere from the retail shelf. If we're, you know, stuck in the dusty ambient shelves and it's only a couple people who used to buy some UHT dairy that we're ever going to appeal to, that's not going to work. We need to be in the chilled section. We need to be where dairy is. And so that's our view. And that's how we'll really change the needle on that.
Is there a question at the back table there?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll stand up. What efforts have you made to encourage ethical investors investing in your product?
So this would definitely be outside of my expertise as the sustainability person. We would want the whole finance crew here to help answer that. We have 2 years ago, we floated on the New York Stock Exchange. So we are open on the market, so anyone can invest in us in that sense. Again, our view is actually fairly similar on this when it comes to investment, as with this. If we're going to totally overhaul the food system, then we need to shift capital. We need to shift capital to green things, right? And as a business who is green, and we're offering a solution that is already lower in impact than the status quo, e.g. dairy. Every time someone purchases an Oatly barista, it's about 60% lower climate impact. I didn't get a chance to talk about that, actually. I didn't get my key messages out, you see. But, you know, we need to attract funding that if this funding would have otherwise gone to something bad, into something that is good. And that's how we'll shift capital to more green things. And that would be our view on that one.
I can't see a clock, so shall we just finish with one online question?
Yeah. Let me just get it up. So the most popular question that's been asked online, with people sort of giving it a thumbs up, is Oatly's clearly got a strong brand identity, and this deliberately polemical and antagonistic approach with big dairy climate numbers campaign is very interesting. But is it proving effective at getting new people on board with your big picture aim?
It's really interesting. On that particular campaign, I would say it's too soon to say. It literally came out 2 weeks ago. So in terms of gathering any insights from that, too soon to say on that. But what I would say is you know, it works in terms of brand awareness and brand equity, and we get people in that way for sure. And we've seen that from previous campaigns. And, you know, our sort of general view is, if you've done a campaign and it hasn't pissed a few people off, has it really even worked? Do you know what I mean? So that that's definitely our sort of philosophy on that one. But the other way that we get people to buy into us is through actually is through trial and taste, and through coffee. We go deep into coffee, and we have entire teams dedicated to working with our coffee channels and building relationships there, because our data shows, you know, if you've tried it in an oat latte in your local coffee shop, you then go, that was pretty nice actually, and then you try and get it in your local supermarket, and that's the trajectory of purchase. So those are, I suppose, are the two biggest ways that we get people into us, through the trial and through the quite provocative campaigns. I don't know if that answered the question, but I think we're wrapping up now. But like I said, I have to go back to London now, but you're going to share my contact details if anyone wants to raise some brilliant questions, and I can put you in touch with more creative and communications savvy people than me.
Brilliant. And you're on LinkedIn as well, so
LinkedIn.
That's a great way to connect if you're on LinkedIn. Before I say thank you to you, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers who took part today, giving their time to share with us, everyone who's been here. Big shout out to all of our online delegates. We really appreciate your questions. We'll be wrapping everything up from the day and sharing all those resources and links and projects that have been mentioned back. But if you have a little bit of time, let's continue the conversation